The greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappear from our family permanently. Those words hit me like a physical blow as I stood in the kitchen of the house I had bought for them, watching my daughter-in-law smile that cold, practiced smile I'd grown to dread. If you are watching this, kindly subscribe and let me know where you are watching from, and I hope that you're safe wherever you are. My name is Eleanor, and at 72 years old, I thought I understood family loyalty. I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought being a mother meant giving everything, even when it left you with nothing. I was wrong about all of it. 3 months ago, I was arranging flowers in what used to be my guest room, now permanently converted to my living space in my son David's house. The house I had made possible with my life savings. The house where I was told I was always welcome, always wanted, always family. Eleanor, we need to talk. Rebecca's voice carried that tone I'd learned to fear, sharp, dismissive. The voice she used when she wanted something or needed to get rid of something inconvenient. I set down the vase carefully. David stood behind her, avoiding my eyes like he always did when Rebecca was about to deliver bad news. In 38 years of being his mother, I'd never seen him stand up to anyone. Not his father when he was drinking, not his boss when he was being unreasonable, and certainly not his wife when she was being cruel. "What's on your mind, dear?" I kept my voice level, pleasant, the way I'd trained myself to speak in this house, where my emotions were always too much, too dramatic, too needy. "It's about the wedding." Rebecca examined her manicured nails, not bothering to look at me. "We've been thinking about the guest list, and honestly, we want something more intimate, more curated." David shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, what Rebecca means is, I can speak for myself, David." Rebecca's interruption was swift, practiced. She'd perfected the art of silencing him over their 5-year relationship. "Eleanor, you've been so generous with everything. The venue deposit, the catering, the flowers. We're grateful, really." The word grateful sounded foreign in her mouth, like she was trying out a new language. "But," I prompted, because there was always a but with Rebecca. "But we want our special day to be perfect, and having family obligation invitations, well, it creates stress, drama. You understand?" I didn't understand, not yet, but I was about to. "Are you uninviting me to your wedding, Rebecca?" David's face went pale. "Mom, that's not what she's saying. Actually, it is." Rebecca finally looked at me, her blue eyes cold as winter morning. "The greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappear from our family permanently. We need space to start our new life, without complications." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same clock I'd given them as a housewarming gift. I could hear David's shallow breathing. I could hear my own heart breaking with a sound like glass shattering. "David," I turned to my son, searching his face for some sign of disagreement, some indication that he would defend the woman who had raised him, sacrificed for him, loved him unconditionally for nearly 4 decades. He looked at his shoes. "Maybe it would be best, Mom, just for now, until we get settled. Just for now." The lie people tell when they mean forever. Something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a gear clicking into a different position after years of grinding in the wrong direction. "I see." I stood up slowly, my arthritic hands gripping the back of the chair for support. "Well then, I suppose I should start making arrangements." Rebecca looked surprised. She'd probably expected tears, pleading, dramatic declarations of hurt feelings that she could later describe to her friends as Eleanor being difficult again. Instead, I smiled. "You're absolutely right, dear. It's time for me to disappear." But as I walked upstairs to pack my things, I wasn't planning to fade quietly into the background. After 38 years of being David's mother and 3 years of being Rebecca's personal bank account, I had learned a few things about disappearing. And sometimes, the most powerful way to disappear is to take everything you brought with you when you go. Have you ever given everything to someone who treats you like nothing? Have you ever loved so deeply that you forgot to save any love for yourself? That's the story of the last 3 years of my life. It started innocently enough. David and Rebecca were young, in love, and drowning in student loan debt. When my husband Frank passed away 2 years ago, He left me with a modest but comfortable inheritance. Our old Victorian house, fully paid off, a healthy retirement account, the security that comes from 45 years of careful saving and smart investments. Mom, we found the perfect house. David had called me breathless with excitement. It's in Rebecca's dream neighborhood, but the down payment is substantial. $68,000, more money than I'd ever spent on anything except our own home. We wouldn't ask, but the market is so competitive. We need to move fast, and our credit isn't quite where it needs to be yet. Rebecca's credit wasn't where it needed to be, because she'd spent her 20s treating shopping like a competitive sport. But I didn't say that. I never said the things I should have said. Instead, I said yes. I sold my beautiful Victorian house, the one Frank and I had lovingly restored over decades of weekends and summers. The house where David had taken his first steps, lost his first tooth, brought his first girlfriend to meet us. I sold my memories and my security to buy my son and his fiancée their dream. You'll always have a place with us, Mom, David had promised. Always. We're family. Family. The word they used when they needed something. The word they forgot when I needed something in return. The pattern started small. A grocery run here, a utility bill there. We're just a little short this month, Mom. The wedding expenses are bigger than we expected. I understood. Weddings were expensive. Young couples struggled. I remembered being their age, counting every penny, sometimes choosing between groceries and gas money. What I didn't remember was having someone to bail us out every time we made poor choices. Rebecca quit her job 6 months after they bought the house. It's too stressful, she announced, over Sunday dinner. David makes enough for both of us, and I want to focus on wedding planning. David didn't make enough for both of them. I knew because I'd been quietly supplementing their lifestyle for months. The electric bill when it got shut off, the car payment when they forgot to budget for it, the credit card minimums when Rebecca's spending sprees caught up with them. I kept a private ledger in my checkbook. Frank had taught me to track every expense, every gift, every loan. The numbers were staggering. In 3 years, I'd given them over $90,000, not including the house down payment. $90,000, and I couldn't remember the last time either of them had asked about my health, my interests, my feelings. I was a bank account with legs, useful when needed, invisible when not. The breaking point should have come 6 months ago, when Rebecca announced she was redecorating the guest room, my room, because it was too depressing for a house with their aesthetic vision. Maybe you could stay in the converted garage, she'd suggested sweetly. It would give you more privacy. The converted garage had no heat and a leaking roof, but I smiled and agreed to help them shop for new furniture instead. The breaking point should have come when they forgot my 72nd birthday, then acted injured when I mentioned feeling overlooked. We're so busy with wedding planning, Mom, David had said. You understand. I always understood. Understanding was my specialty. But standing in that kitchen, listening to Rebecca tell me that my presence at their wedding, the wedding I was paying for, would be an unwelcome complication, I finally understood something different. I understood that I had taught them to treat me this way. Every time I said yes, when I should have said no. Every time I smiled, when I should have set boundaries. Every time I chose their comfort over my own dignity. I had created this monster of entitlement, and now it was devouring me. But monsters, I was about to learn, are only as powerful as the people who feed them. And I was done being their food source. The next morning, I sat in my Honda Civic outside Hartley and Associates, the law firm that had handled Frank's estate planning. I hadn't called ahead. I wasn't even sure Margaret Hartley would see me without an appointment, but I needed answers, and I needed them before my courage failed. The receptionist, a kind woman with silver hair and sympathetic eyes, squeezed me in between appointments. Margaret had been our family lawyer for over 20 years. She knew our history, our values, our careful approach to financial planning. Eleanor, Margaret's face was concerned as I settled into the leather chair across from her desk. You look troubled. What can I do for you? I told her everything. The wedding uninvitation, the years of financial support, the casual cruelty of being told to disappear from my own family. Margaret listened without interruption, taking notes in her precise handwriting. Eleanor, do you remember signing additional documents when David and Rebecca bought the house? Beyond the gift letter for the down payment, I frowned, searching my memory. There were so many papers. I signed whatever you put in front of me. You said it was all standard. Margaret pulled out a thick file folder. These weren't standard, Eleanor. I was worried about protecting your investment, especially given some concerning patterns I noticed in Rebecca's financial history. She spread documents across her desk: mortgage papers, deed transfers, legal agreements written in dense legal language that might as well have been ancient Greek. What am I looking at, Margaret? You're looking at your ownership stake in David and Rebecca's house. The words didn't make sense. My what? Eleanor, the $68,000 wasn't processed as a gift. Legally, it was recorded as a capital investment in exchange for equity ownership. You own 37% of that house. I stared at the papers, trying to process what she was telling me. But David said it was a gift. Rebecca talks about their house. What David and Rebecca call it doesn't matter. What matters is what the legal documents say. And the legal documents say you're a co-owner with full rights to your share of the property. Margaret pulled out another document. There's more.
I had
Remember
trusted
when their
her.
furnace died
Frank and
last
I
winter,
had
and
always
you paid
trusted
for the
Margaret
replacement?
to look out
That
for
was
our best
processed as a
interests.
home
And
improvement
apparently,
investment.
she had
When
been
you
looking
paid
out
for
for
the
my
new roof this
interests,
spring,
even when I
another
wasn't looking
investment.
out for them
According
myself.
to these records,
Margaret,
your total
hypothetically
equity stake
speaking,
is now
what would happen if I
42%?
decided to
I felt
exercise
dizzy.
these ownership
Margaret,
rights?
what does this mean?
Well,
It
you'd
means
have
that
several
if you wanted
options.
to,
You
could
could
force
demand
the sale
immediate
of the house
buyout
tomorrow.
at fair
As a
market value.
co-owner,
You could
have
force
the
a
legal
sale
right to
and
demand
claim your
share
percentage
of
of the
equity.
proceeds.
At current
Or
market
you could
values,
negotiate
your
some other
42%
arrangement.
would be
I
worth
thought about
approximately
Rebecca's words. The greatest gift would be if you disappear from our family permanently. And if they couldn't afford to buy me out, then the house would go on the market, and you'd receive your percentage of the sale proceeds after paying off the remaining mortgage. I sat quietly for several minutes, processing this information. David and Rebecca had spent 3 years treating me like an unwelcome guest in a house I partially owned. They'd accepted my money, my support, my sacrifices, and then decided I was too much trouble to include in their wedding. Margaret, I want you to prepare a notice of intent to exercise my ownership rights. Eleanor, are you sure about this? Once we start this process, relationships will be permanently damaged. I thought about the relationship I had with David now. The careful way I moved through the house, trying not to disturb their perfect life. The way Rebecca spoke to me, like I was hired help, who occasionally overstepped boundaries. The way David avoided looking at me when his wife was cruel. Margaret, I think my relationship with them is already permanently damaged. They just forgot to tell me. She nodded slowly. What do you want the notice to say? I want them to know that as a co-owner, I'm evaluating my investment, and I want them to understand that co-owners have rights. When do you want this delivered? I thought about the timeline. Their wedding was in 6 weeks. They'd already put deposits down on everything from flowers to photographers, all charged to credit cards they couldn't really afford, all planned around a budget that assumed I would continue subsidizing their lifestyle indefinitely. Tomorrow, I said firmly. I want it delivered tomorrow morning. Margaret began typing notes on her computer. Eleanor, you should know that this could get ugly. People don't like being reminded of legal realities they've chosen to ignore. Margaret, they told me to disappear from their family. I'm just granting their wish, but I'm taking my money with me when I go. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of taking control of my own life. For 3 years, I'd been reactive, responsive, accommodating. I'd let other people decide my worth, my place, my value. But ownership has its privileges. And I was about to remind my son and his fiancée that some gifts come with strings attached. The question was, were they ready to learn what those strings could do when pulled tight? The notice was delivered at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning by registered mail. I know because I was sitting in my car across the street, watching through binoculars like some kind of suburban spy. David signed for it. I saw his confused expression as he read the return address, then watched his face go white as he tore open the envelope. My phone started ringing 17 minutes later. Mom, what the hell is this legal notice about? I'd never heard David use that tone with me before. Panic, mixed with anger, disbelief mixed with fear. It's exactly what it says, sweetheart. A formal notification that I'm considering exercising my ownership rights in the property. Ownership rights. Mom, we own this house. You gave us money for the down payment. Actually, David, I invested money in exchange for equity. There's a difference. Silence, then frantic whispering in the background. Rebecca had grabbed the phone.
Eleanor, this is ridiculous. You can't own part of our house. We live here. We pay the mortgage. I pay quite a bit of the mortgage too, dear. Along with most of your other bills, this is some kind of mistake. A misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, Rebecca. I misunderstood my place in this family. You've helped clarify that for me. More whispering. David came back on the line. Mom, can we talk about this in person? Maybe we can work something out. Certainly. But we'll be meeting in my lawyer's office, with proper documentation of any agreements we reach. I hung up before they could respond. 3 days later, we sat around Margaret's conference table like negotiators in a corporate takeover, which, in a way, we were. David looked like he hadn't slept. Rebecca wore designer clothes and her most intimidating expression, the one she used when she wanted to remind people that she came from money and wasn't impressed by their little games. Margaret spread the ownership documents across the table with professional efficiency. Let's review the facts, she began crisply. Eleanor has invested $112,000 in this property over 3 years. Current market value is $380,000. Eleanor's equity stake is 42%, worth approximately $160,000. Rebecca's face was stone. This is extortion. No, dear, I said quietly. Extortion would be demanding something I'm not entitled to. I'm simply claiming what already belongs to me. David leaned forward desperately. Mom, you know we can't afford to buy you out. If you force a sale, we'll lose our home. You'll lose the home I made possible, yes. But you'll walk away with nearly $200,000 in proceeds. That's enough to buy something more suited to your actual income level. The truth of that statement hung in the air like smoke. For 3 years, they'd been living in a house they couldn't afford, subsidized by money they hadn't earned, maintaining a lifestyle that required constant financial support from someone they treated with casual contempt. What do you want? Rebecca's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. What did I want? I wanted 3 years of respect I'd never received. I wanted gratitude for sacrifices that had been taken for granted. I wanted my son to defend me, just once, against his wife's cruelty. But those things couldn't be negotiated in a lawyer's office. I want what anyone would want when they're told to disappear from their family, I said. I want to take my investment with me when I go. David was doing math on his phone calculator. Mom, even if we sold tomorrow, after realtor fees and paying off the mortgage, there wouldn't be enough left for both of us to buy new places. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before telling me I was unwelcome at your wedding. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. That was a private conversation. You're being vindictive and petty. I'm being practical and protective. For 3 years, I've put your needs before my own financial security. I've enabled a lifestyle you couldn't maintain without my support. And in return, you've made it clear that I'm an inconvenience you'd prefer to eliminate. Margaret intervened smoothly. Perhaps we could discuss payment options. Eleanor, would you consider owner financing? They could buy out your share over time with interest. I'd been thinking about this for days. At what interest rate? And with what collateral? They've already proven they don't honor financial obligations. David flinched. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? You currently owe me $14,000 in emergency loans from the past year alone. Loans you've never mentioned repaying. Why would I trust you with a $160,000 debt? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Rebecca was texting furiously under the table, probably calling her parents for emergency funding. Rebecca, put the phone away, I said calmly. Your parents aren't going to bail you out of this one. How do you know what my parents will do? Because I had lunch with your mother yesterday. Both David and Rebecca stared at me in shock. Patricia and I had a very enlightening conversation about enabling our children's poor choices. She's decided it's time for you to face some consequences without family money cushioning the fall. Rebecca went pale. You turned my mother against me. I didn't need to turn her against you, dear. Your behavior has done that all by itself. Margaret cleared her throat. Eleanor, what are your terms for resolution? I looked at my son and his fiancée, these two people I'd loved and supported and sacrificed for, who had repaid my generosity with disrespect and ingratitude. I want my equity purchased at current market value within 90 days, or I want the house listed for sale. 90 days. David's voice cracked.
Mom, that's not enough time to arrange financing. It's plenty of time to face reality. Rebecca was crying now, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. You're destroying our lives over hurt feelings. I'm protecting my financial future after being told I have no place in yours. I stood up, gathering my purse and documents. You have 89 days to decide how you want to handle this. But decide quickly. The real estate market waits for no one. As I walked toward the door, David called after me. Mom, what happened to family first? What happened to unconditional love? I turned back to look at him. This man I'd raised from infancy, who had just learned that love might be unconditional, but financial support wasn't. Sweetheart, unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional funding, and family first works both ways. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. 89 days to learn what the rest of us already knew. Actions have consequences, and family isn't a free pass to treat people badly. What would you do if your family treated you like an ATM? What would you do if the people you loved most made you feel like your only value was the money you could provide? I was about to find out what happened when the ATM shut down. The first week after our lawyer meeting was silent. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I assumed they were scrambling, calling banks, begging relatives, trying to find a way out of the corner they'd painted themselves into. I was wrong. They were planning something much more dramatic. On Thursday morning, I found David waiting by my car in the parking lot of my new apartment complex. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of desperate exhaustion that comes from sleepless nights and impossible problems. Mom, we need to talk. We talked in Margaret's office. You have 74 days left to make a decision. About that. He shifted nervously. Rebecca's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. A grandchild. The one thing I dreamed about for years, the one joy I thought might bring our family closer together. How far along? 8 weeks. We just found out yesterday. I studied his face, looking for the joy that should accompany such news. Instead, I saw calculation, strategy, the realization that he was using his unborn child as a negotiating tactic. Congratulations, I said quietly. I'm very happy for you both. Mom, you can't force us to sell the house now. We need stability. We need that nursery room. We need the good school district. The nursery room. The converted garage with no heat, and a leaking roof that Rebecca had suggested I move into. David, your housing situation isn't my responsibility. It's yours. But you're going to be this baby's grandmother. Am I? Because last week you told me I needed to disappear from your family permanently. He flinched. That was Rebecca being emotional about wedding stress. She didn't mean it. She meant it enough to say it. And you meant it enough to agree with her. I unlocked my car door, but David stepped closer, blocking my path. Mom, please, if you do this, you'll never see your grandchild. Is that really what you want? And there it was. The threat I'd been expecting. The final manipulation in their arsenal. David, let me ask you something.
You really think threatening to keep my grandchild away from me is going to make me more generous?
Do you think holding your baby hostage is going to restore our relationship? I'm not threatening anything. I'm just saying that relationships have consequences. Yes, they do. And the consequence of telling someone to disappear from your family is that they might actually disappear. I got into my car, but rolled down the window for one final message. 73 days, sweetheart. And David, congratulations on learning exactly the wrong lesson from this situation. As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, standing alone in the parking lot, probably calling Rebecca to report that the guilt trip hadn't worked. The second week brought a different strategy, the full court press. Rebecca's parents flew in from California. David's college friends started calling me, sharing stories about young families struggling to make ends meet. Even my own sister called, concerned about family rumors she'd heard. Eleanor, honey, David says you're trying to force them out of their house. Over some misunderstanding about the wedding. Janet, did David mention that they told me to disappear from their family permanently? A pause. He said Rebecca was stressed about wedding planning. Did he mention that I've given them over $100,000 in the past 3 years? A longer pause. Eleanor, are you sure this is wise? Their family. So am I, Janet. Or at least I thought I was. The pressure campaign intensified. Mutual friends shared concerned observations about my sudden personality change. David's work colleagues mentioned running into him at the bank, where he'd been trying unsuccessfully to secure a home equity loan large enough to buy out my share. Rebecca cornered me at the grocery store on Tuesday afternoon, her pregnancy glow overshadowed by dark circles under her eyes. "Eleanor, please, I'm begging you. I made a mistake. I was wrong. I'll do anything to make this right." I continued selecting apples, not trusting myself to look at her directly. Pregnancy had always been my weakness. I'd lost 2 babies before David was born, and the sight of an expectant mother still stirred protective instincts I couldn't quite suppress. "Anything, Rebecca. Yes, anything. Will you get a job?" "A job?" She sounded shocked. "But I'm pregnant." "Pregnant women work all the time, dear. Until you suggested I disappear. I was planning to help with childcare so you could maintain your career." "I don't have a career. I have a bachelor's degree in art history." "Then perhaps it's time to start one. Retail work, office work, anything that brings in income and teaches you the value of money you earn yourself." "That's not fair. David makes enough for both of us." "David makes enough for David. He's been making enough for both of you with my financial assistance. Without that assistance, you're going to discover what enough actually means." I moved toward the checkout line, and she followed, her voice rising with desperation. "This is all about money, about me not having a job. Eleanor, I thought you loved me like a daughter." I stopped walking, and finally looked at her directly. Really looked at her. 29 years old, beautiful, intelligent, completely untested by real adversity, spoiled by parents who'd given her everything, now married to a man whose mother had continued that pattern. "Rebecca, I did love you like a daughter. Do you know how I would treat a daughter who spoke to me the way you spoke to me? How? I'd let her learn what independence actually costs." At the checkout counter, I paid for my groceries while Rebecca stood beside me, tears streaming down her face. Other customers stared, probably wondering what family drama they were witnessing. "Please," she whispered, "we'll lose everything." "No, dear, you'll lose the things you couldn't afford in the first place. There's a difference." As I loaded my grocery bags into the car, Rebecca made one final plea. "What about the baby? Don't you want to be part of your grandchild's life?" I'd been dreading this question for 2 weeks. The answer would define everything that came next. "Rebecca, I want to be part of a family that values me for more than my bank account. If you and David can build that kind of family, then yes, I'd love to be the best grandmother this baby could
Margaret
have.
called me on
And
a
if we
Wednesday
can't,
morning during
then I
week
guess
6
you'll
of our
learn what
90-day
disappearing
countdown.
from the family
"Eleanor,
actually
I've
means.
received a formal
58
proposal from
days
David and
left.
Rebecca's
And for the
attorney.
first time
I was
since this
repotting
started,
plants on the
I
small
wasn't
balcony
sure
of my
which outcome
apartment,
I was hoping
enjoying
for.
the morning sun and the peace that came with living somewhere I wasn't made to feel like an unwelcome guest. What kind of proposal? They're offering to buy out your share for $80,000, paid over 5 years at 3% interest." I almost laughed. "So they want to pay me less than I've already invested, over 5 years at below market interest rates?" "That's correct. Their attorney argues that forced liquidation would leave everyone worse off, and this represents a good faith attempt at compromise." What it represents, Margaret, is exactly the same entitled thinking that created this problem in the first place. There's more. They've attached a letter from Rebecca's obstetrician confirming the pregnancy, along with medical bills they say they can't afford without your continued financial support. I set down my trowel and walked inside, needing to sit down for this conversation. They're using their unborn child as a negotiating chip? It appears so. They're also requesting that you waive any claim to reimbursement for the emergency loans they've received over the past 3 years. $14,000 in emergency loans that were supposed to be temporary. Money I'd given them for everything from car repairs to credit card payments to medical bills they couldn't budget for. "Margaret, what's the current market value of my share?" "Based on recent comparable sales, approximately $175,000. I did the math in my head. They were offering me less than half what I was owed, in payments stretched so long that inflation would eat away most of the value. What's their deadline for an answer?" "They want a response by Friday, 2 days to decide whether to accept insult disguised as compromise." "Margaret, I want you to draft a counter-proposal." "What kind of counter-proposal?" "Market value buyout, $175,000, due in 60 days. or the house goes on the market. Eleanor, they've already told us they can't secure financing for that amount. Then they can't afford the house. It's really that simple. I spent the rest of that day thinking about the baby, my grandchild, who would be born into this mess of entitlement and financial irresponsibility. A child who would either learn that actions have consequences or learn that family members could be manipulated and exploited without limit. David called me Thursday evening, his voice tight with controlled anger. Mom, we can't accept your counter-proposal. You know we can't get that kind of loan. Then sell the house, David. Use your proceeds to buy something you can actually afford. In this market, with a baby coming? Mom, you're being unreasonable. I'm being realistic. You're being entitled. Entitled? Mom, I'm trying to provide for my family, with money that isn't yours in a house you can't afford, while treating the person funding your lifestyle like an inconvenience. What do you want from us? What would it take to make this right? Finally, the right question. I want an acknowledgement that I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for 3 years. I want an apology for being told to disappear from your family. I want a realistic plan for how you're going to support yourselves without my money. And I want to see some evidence that you understand the difference between family obligation and financial exploitation. That's the lot, Mom. It's less than you owe me, sweetheart. Friday morning brought unexpected visitors. David and Rebecca stood at my apartment door, looking like they hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, David said. Can we come in? I made coffee while they sat on my small couch, both of them looking around my modest apartment with surprise. Rebecca seemed shocked that furniture could be attractive without being expensive. David appeared puzzled by the collection of books and plants that made the space feel warm without being lavish. This is nice, Mom, he said finally. Peaceful. It's what I can afford on my actual income, I replied, without anyone else supplementing my lifestyle. Rebecca took a shaky breath. Eleanor, I owe you an enormous apology. Not the panic apology I gave you in Margaret's office, but a real one. I waited, stirring cream into my coffee. I've been thinking about what you said about treating you like a daughter, about consequences and independence. She looked down at her hands. I've never had a job that mattered. I've never paid my own bills. I've never had to choose between things I wanted because I could only afford one of them. Go on. I treated you terribly because I didn't understand that your money represented sacrifice. I thought you gave it to us because you had extra, not because you were choosing our comfort over your own security. David shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we found out something yesterday that we should have known all along. What's that? Your retirement account. Rebecca was looking through old financial papers, trying to find assets we could use as collateral, and she found your last statement. My stomach clenched. I'd hoped they'd never see those numbers. You don't have enough saved for retirement. Rebecca continued, her voice barely above a whisper. After everything you've given us, you don't have enough to live on if you can't work. That's not your responsibility. Yes, it is, David interrupted. If we're family, it absolutely is. Rebecca was crying now, but these tears looked different. Eleanor, I told you to disappear because I was jealous of how much David loves you. I was threatened by your relationship with him, and I wanted you gone so I could have him all to myself. The honesty in that admission was startling, raw and ugly and real. But yesterday, when I saw those financial statements, I realized what kind of person that made me. The kind of person who would destroy someone who'd sacrificed everything for us because I was insecure about sharing attention. I sat down across from them, setting my coffee cup on the table with careful precision. What are you proposing? David pulled out a folder of papers. We want to give you the house. I'm sorry. What? We want to transfer full ownership to you. We'll move out, find an apartment we can actually afford, and pay you rent until we've saved enough for our own down payment. I stared at them, trying to process what they were suggesting. David, this house is your home. You've put 3 years of your life into making it yours. It was never really ours, Mom. We just convinced ourselves it was. Rebecca leaned forward. Eleanor, would you consider letting us rent the guest room month to month? Not as family taking advantage, but as tenants paying fair market rate. The role reversal was complete. They were asking to live in my house, pay me rent, and rebuild their relationship with me from a position of honesty instead of entitlement. What about the baby? The baby will have a roof over their head and parents who understand the value of money they earn themselves, David said. And hopefully, a grandmother who can teach them about responsibility and consequences and the difference between love and enabling. I looked around my apartment, then back at these two people who had just offered to give me everything they thought they wanted. Let me think about it, I said. This is a big decision, but in my heart, I already knew what my answer would be. Sometimes the best way to disappear from a family is to show them what life looks like without you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they realize they don't want you to disappear at all. Is it wrong to demand respect from people you've sacrificed for? Is it wrong to expect gratitude from people you've loved unconditionally? I spent 3 days thinking about David and Rebecca's proposal before giving them my answer. Yes, I said, during our final meeting in Margaret's office, but with conditions. They nodded eagerly, prepared to accept almost anything. First, Rebecca gets a job within 60 days, any job, and keeps it. Already applied to 3 places, she said quietly. Second, you both attend financial counseling to learn how to budget and live within your means. We've already scheduled the first appointment, David replied. Third, the rent you pay me goes into a trust fund for the baby's education. This isn't about me making money off you. It's about you learning the value of money you earn yourselves. Rebecca was crying again, but these were different tears. Relief mixed with gratitude, mixed with something that looked like respect. And finally, I continued, we start over, not as enabler and enabled, not as bank and borrowers, but as family members who treat each other with dignity and kindness. What does that look like? David asked. It looks like asking about each other's lives. It looks like sharing responsibilities instead of dumping them on one person. It looks like saying thank you when someone helps you, and please when you need something. We signed the papers that afternoon. The house transferred into my name, along with the mortgage payments I could easily afford with their rent contributions. They moved into the guest room temporarily while looking for their own apartment. But something interesting happened during that temporary arrangement. Rebecca discovered she was excellent at managing the dental office where she'd found work. David started cooking dinner most nights, something he'd never done while I was subsidizing their restaurant habits. They began talking to me about their fears and excitement about becoming parents, and I discovered something unexpected. I enjoyed their company when it wasn't built on financial obligation. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my house, legally and emotionally mine now, watching Rebecca teach her 6-month-old daughter how to clap her tiny hands. Grandma Eleanor, Rebecca said, bouncing baby Sarah on her hip. Would you like to hold her while I start dinner? Grandma Eleanor, not just Eleanor, not the woman who used to pay for everything. Grandma. David came home from work with flowers he'd bought with money he'd earned himself. For both my girls, he said, handing them to me and kissing my cheek. Rebecca had been promoted twice at the dental office. David had received a raise after taking on additional responsibilities at work. They'd found a small house they could afford with their combined income and saved enough for their own down payment. Mom, we've been talking, David said over dinner, about moving out next month when we close on the new place. I felt a familiar pang of loss, followed by something new pride. They were ready to succeed on their own. I'll miss having you here, I said honestly. We'll miss being here, Rebecca replied, but it's time for us to build something that's really ours, and for you to have your house back, David added. We know you gave up your independence to help us, and we want you to have it back. That weekend, Rebecca organized a goodbye dinner, not just for David and her, but for all of us, for the people we used to be and the people we'd become. Eleanor, she said, raising her glass of sparkling cider, I want to thank you for disappearing from our family. I looked at her in confusion. Not literally, she laughed, but for disappearing as our enabler, for forcing us to see who we'd become when someone else was always there to catch us, for loving us enough to let us fail. David nodded. Mom, I spent 3 years taking advantage of your generosity because it was easier than growing up. You could have kept enabling us forever. Instead, you taught us how to be adults. Baby Sarah gurgled happily from her high chair, completely unaware that she'd been born into the middle of the most important lesson her parents would ever learn. And Sarah, I said, looking at my granddaughter, will grow up understanding that love doesn't mean never saying no. That family means supporting each other, not exploiting each other. That respect is earned, not assumed. 3 months later,
I received an envelope with my name written in Rebecca's careful handwriting. Inside was a check for $5,000. The note read, "Eleanor, this is the first payment toward repaying the emergency loans we received over the years. It will take us time to pay back everything. But we want you to know that we remember every dollar and every sacrifice. Thank you for teaching us that owing someone money is different from owing them gratitude. But both debts should be honored. Love, David, Rebecca, and Sarah." I deposited the check into Sarah's college fund. At 73, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to rescue them from their own choices. Sometimes disappearing means showing up for yourself. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of boundaries. Subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your own strength. And remember, love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling.